so we'll get going. Good morning, everyone, and welcome along to today's Tide Masterclass, Handling Late Payments. My name is Cohen Hawker, and I'm the event manager here at Tide. And it's great to have you along for today's session, whether you're watching us live, whether you're watching us on YouTube or on-demand service. Just give you a quick tour of Zoom, just in case you haven't used the platform before. On your toolbar, you will see a Q&A button and a chat button. We'll be using the Q&A button for questions, obviously, for Philip later on as we get to the end of the session. So if you have any questions, please do get those into the Q&A box. The chat room we'll be utilizing to share some useful links with you, but if you'd just like to say hello or you'd like to tell us what you're up to today or anything like that, please do send those messages into the chat room, and I look forward to seeing those. For those of you who are new to Tide and what we do, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of our services before we get going with the session. So we're the fastest growing online business current account provider in the UK, and we currently have over 300,000 members, a milestone which we passed this week, and we're very pleased and proud about that. And our aim is to provide our members with a service that saves them both time and money when it comes to their business banking. We are great for SMEs and for startups and for freelancers. And because there's no credit checks and there's no startup fees or monthly fees, this even allows you to try us out alongside your current business bank account provider, if you have one, to see how we can save you time and money. The sign-up process itself is really simple and really quick. It takes between 5 and 10 minutes. And then you'll receive your sort code and your account number so you can start banking straight away, and you'll get your beautiful Tide card in the post a few days later. The app itself is really simple to use, and there's a huge amount of in-app products and services that are really useful. A few of the ones that I find really useful, the auto categorization tool, so you can see exactly where your money went and when it went there, which is really useful for handling late payments, handling payments in general. And the ability for you to send fully customizable invoices as well. So you can include your company logo, you can fully edit the email which goes along with the invoice. So again, with handling payments, that's really useful. We have a great link with Go Cardless as well, which happened towards the end of last year, which means you can set up, your customers can set up direct debits to help with payments. So that means you can have predictable cash flow, you can avoid late payments. The stress of chasing people for payments disappears as well, because you're not asking your debtor to get in touch with you, or you're not chasing them payments. The direct debit is set up, and you can focus more on your business rather than chasing your debtors if you have them. For your customers, that is really simple too. It's easy for them to set up in a couple of minutes with an online form. It's really transparent. All the customers which have that set up for your account will be notified via email when the invoice payment is due, and it's really efficient. There's no more writing out of checks or logging on to online banking for your customers, and all of the payments are safe and protected as well. So even if the payment is taken in error, it's all fully protected. So we have we did a masterclass with Go Cardless as well, and I'm going to put the link for that masterclass into the chat room right now, which is there. So if you have an interest in that, please do head over to YouTube and watch that masterclass at a later date. I will also be talking to you a little bit later on how to stay up to date with what we're doing here at Tide in terms of our business and in terms of future events. But for now, we're going to get on with the main body of the masterclass, and I'm going to ask our fantastic panelist, Philip King. We're really pleased to have him. Just to give a quick introduction. Good morning, Philip. How are you?
Good morning, Cohen. I'm very well, thank you, and good morning to everybody. My name's Philip King. I've been working in credit management for the last 40 years, and for the last year, I've been the interim Small Business Commissioner. Because of that career history and because of my speciality, I am passionate about all things credit and cash flow management and all things small business. And I'm grateful to Tide this morning for giving me the opportunity to speak to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Phil. And once again, thank you for taking the time out. I know you're a very, very busy man, but we really appreciate having you along for this morning's important masterclass, I think. So I think I wanted to get started with, we've obviously been through a very challenging 12 months personally and in business as well. And I think there's been a lot of challenges for people that have wanted to start small businesses, have started small businesses, have had a small business for a while. And I wonder what your thoughts and the office's thoughts are over on the next 12 months and what the challenges may be for people that have started or are thinking of starting small businesses.
Well, there's no doubt, as you say, Cohen, that it's been a really tough few months, and it continues to be as we're still in lockdown and so on. And I think that for small businesses particularly, the pressure on cash flow has been and continues to be bigger than ever. We've seen that the bounce back loans are going to start being repayable relatively shortly. The opportunity to apply for them closes, I think, in March. We're seeing the ban on commercial evictions coming to an end in March. The ban on winding up petitions comes to an end at the end of March. tax deferrals are now sort of winding out and taxes are becoming payable. And for many businesses, they've come to informal arrangements with their landlords, and those are going to start to unwind. So there's a huge amount of pressure that's sort of coming down the tracks, which needs to be faced. So cash flow is going to be really important. And sadly, we're going to see an increase in failures of businesses throughout that time. There's no doubt that businesses are going to fail, that have not been able to survive through the pandemic. And I think the important thing for SMEs to bear in mind, that some of those failures might indeed be their customers currently, and therefore they need to think about the impact on those customers and what that might mean for their business in terms of whether they get paid or not, and indeed whether they've got business from those clients or not. I think the other thing that's interesting is that there's going to be, in my view, a shortage of trade credit for small businesses. I think the balance sheets are going to have changed as a result, and large providers of trade credit are going to be more choosy about who they give credit to and are going to be more cautious. And as a result of that, they are going to be thinking more about who they give credit to, and that might have an impact on small businesses. And finally, it would be remiss of me not to mention the transition from the EU, which clearly is having an impact on businesses that are trading outside the UK.
Yeah, some really interesting points. I hadn't thought about, obviously if you're a small business owner, you're thinking about your business, but then thinking about your suppliers or other people that you're dealing with that, you have to worry about or be concerned about their business going under as well, and how that is going to have a supply chain maybe in impact on you, which is a really interesting and important thing to consider, I guess. So for the people that maybe aren't aware of the Small Business Commissioner's Office and your work, it'd be I think really interesting to know how you operate, what your role is, and what you do to help small businesses.
Yeah, thanks, Cohen. So the Office of the Small Business Commissioner was set up under the Enterprise Act in 2017. I think there are three aspects to what we do. The first is that we give advice. So I've got a team of caseworkers who answer calls on the phone and by email and through the website from small businesses on anything to do with late payment. So if a business is trying to set up a contract or looking for how to invoice or indeed how to get paid, then my team of caseworkers can help. And where we can't help directly, then we will signpost to other organisations that can, where we have good relationships. So if mediation is needed, we can signpost. Throughout lockdown, we've had lots of calls about grants and EU processes and so on, and we signpost to other services where we can't help directly.
Okay.
The second aspect is collecting money. So we will collect money for small businesses who are struggling to get paid by a larger customer. So far, we've collected £7.8 million, and in lockdown, we've collected £1.1 million and counting by the day. And those amounts of money we've collected range from £524 we collected for a really small business one Friday afternoon, which was genuinely, for her, the difference between putting food on the table that weekend or not, and was therefore really important, right up to £125,000 for an engineering company that had got massive amounts of money outstanding where we intervened. We will pick up the phone and talk to a large customer, understand why they haven't paid, and try and persuade them to pay. And I guess it's no surprise that the Office of the Small Business Commissioner has a slightly more clout than a tiny business in the middle of Hertfordshire, say. So we have some power that they wouldn't have.
Yeah.
And so we will have conversations and we will encourage them to part with cash. And where we see poor practice, I have the power to issue reports publicly which set out what I've seen, set out recommendations of how businesses should improve, and work to improve their payment practice and their treatment of small suppliers. And I should have said at the outset that all those services are free to user, so we don't make any charge for our services. The third element is changing culture. So we are tasked by government with changing the payment culture, and we do that by trying to educate. So I've spent a lot of time through lockdown talking to large businesses where we've had intelligence that they've been delaying payments or suspending payments to their small suppliers. I've talked to chief executives and chief financial officers, sometimes in joint calls with the minister involved, to understand their position and to persuade them that looking after their small supply chain is really important, and explaining to them that what for them might be a few rows on a spreadsheet of invoices, for the small business is often a really emotional issue. I've talked to thousands of small businesses throughout lockdown and heard harrowing stories of mental issues, well-being issues, eating disorders, sleep deprivation, and so on. And it's really important that big businesses recognize the power that they have emotionally to impact on their small suppliers. And that's why we've been collaborating with the business rep organizations, with fintech organizations like Tide this morning, and with trade bodies to talk through webinars throughout the lockdown to businesses. And finally, we host for government the Prompt Payment Code, which was recently relaunched and reformed with some additional criteria, which is a way of getting businesses to commit to treating their suppliers well, as a means to driving changing culture.
That's really interesting. I think it's something that I wasn't aware of a few months ago, to be honest with you, and I'm sure there's lots of people out there that aren't aware of you. So it's really good to know that you are there and doing the back work and the sort of heavy lifting when it comes to this kind of stuff to make sure the small businesses are being protected. You mentioned a couple of the small businesses you've helped, and I wonder if you had any more examples of where help small businesses struggling to get payment from their larger customers and how that's worked for them.
Yeah, sure. It's always good to share real life examples.
Yeah.
I've already shared the £524 example,
Yeah.
which is one of my favourites, because even though it's so small, for that business it was huge and made a real difference to her. But Jane was from a small engineering firm with 25 employees. She'd been chasing £91,000 for 3 months, getting absolutely nowhere, getting run around and not getting any money out. She talked to us, we talked to the business, and within a week, £91,000 hit her account. That was before Christmas and meant that 25 employees kept their jobs and would otherwise have lost them, and the business would have gone bust. And another business in Manchester that only had 5 employees, but was a consultancy advice service, was owed just about £280,000 and was on the brink of going bust. We talked to them. The customer was disputing the amount of money that was owed, and they were getting to a stalemate and were struggling to come to an agreement. We got involved, talked to both parties. We managed to get them to resolve the dispute between them. They then got full payment, and they avoided insolvency. And that's really important. And for them, again, it was jobs, and that business is still trading. And interestingly, still trading with the business where we intervened. So it hasn't stopped the relationship. We just managed to sort of mediate and bring a conclusion.
Okay.
I could go on all morning about examples, but I'll stop there.
No, I think it's great. It's nice to hear, like you say, there's real life examples, and just to see how the SBC really does help people struggling with these issues. And I think we talked in the run up to this event how you also talk to sort of the larger industries and larger businesses. It'd be maybe interesting to understand why you do that, and if you could share any details of the conversations you had and what those impacts have been talking to the larger industries and in relation to the SMEs and in the country as well.
Yes, well, early in the lockdown, we realised that there was a temptation on large businesses to delay or suspend payment to their smaller suppliers, and often indeed to all suppliers. And I recognised that was going to have a real impact. So I started a program of writing out to chief execs and chief financial officers of large businesses, many of whose names you would recognise from the high street. And although strictly outside my powers to intervene, I need a specific complaint before I can intervene, what I did was to write informally and say, can I just have a chat with you to understand your position? And I probably had 30 or 40 calls with FDs or chief execs of large businesses, understood their position, and got them to understand mine. And what we found was that quite often before that call even took place, they'd addressed the issue I wanted to talk to them about because they realized they were under the spotlight.
Yeah.
But in particular, I think two examples I'll share. One was a large chain of garden centres that was in real trouble itself at the time. This is last April. Was in real trouble itself and was really struggling with cash flow. So we talked to them and we managed to introduce and set up a conversation with one or two small suppliers who were really struggling, plant wholesaler suppliers. And what we did for them was to enable them to get part payment of what was owed and a payment plan to follow, which meant that some money transferred and was really helpful. And another major engineering business that has been through incredibly difficult cash flow problems and was really struggling. What we've done with them, we have released probably about £250,000 for a number of suppliers just before Christmas. And what we did with them was we were talking to them about what funds they had available. We were talking to them about which customers we were hearing from who were really struggling, and then they were prioritising their payments to those businesses that we were highlighting. And so we acted as a conduit to make sure that the limited funds they had went to the right businesses that needed them most. And that's been a real success. And we've made some real friends amongst the small suppliers who are struggling. But we've also got a really good relationship with that large business now, where I can pick the phone up and talk to their chief exec and say, do you know about this one? Is there anything you can do? And they've managed to help. And I think for me, throughout lockdown, the focus has been on collaboration rather than confrontation. Sure. So I've not been sort of wielding a big stick with people, but actually talk to them saying, how can we work together and how can you help the small suppliers in your supply chain who need it most?
Yeah, I think that's really key, isn't it? Just having the authority to maybe step it up if you need to, but not going in heavy-handed. And I think that's a good example for business owners as well. If you are having issues with late payments, trying to get it resolved in a sort of calm manner and not going in heavy-handed with legal representation or anything like that straight away. I think it's a nice learning from someone in your position that small business owners can sort of take on to their own issues as well. And during our conversations again leading up to this event, you talked about the prompt payment code, which is something I wasn't aware of, but I think it's been recently reformed and relaunched. And maybe that's something you can tell us about and expand on, and where the changes have been and what the reactions have been to that as well. That'd be interesting, I think.
Certainly. So the prompt payment code was launched in 2009 when Peter Mandelson was business minister. At that time, I was chief exec of the Chartered Institute of Credit Management, and he asked me to set the code up and administer it for government, and we did that until last year. When the Small Business Commissioner was created, it made sense for late payment measures to sit under one umbrella, and so we agreed we would transfer the administration to the Small Business Commissioner's office, and that happened last March. The fundamental principles of the code have always been to pay suppliers on time, to give clear guidance to suppliers to make sure they're able to get paid, and to adopt and encourage good practice down the supply chain. So that's always been the case, and it's seen a couple of steps of evolution when it's been sort of changed. It was strengthened in 2015 when Matt Hancock was business minister. But we relaunched it at the beginning of January this year. We reformed it, having consulted back end of last year. And the key changes are that historically we required signatories to pay 95% of invoices within 60 days. That's now being changed so that the invoices from businesses with less than 50 employees have to be paid in 30 days rather than 60. That's been implemented and will come into effect from July this year, but is being transitioned as we speak. We're requiring businesses signatories to recognise the right of their suppliers to charge interest and late payment consultation if they pay without good cause. And we're requiring that the CEO, the FD, or the company owner in a smaller business sign the application to join the code to make sure that it's taken seriously within the organisation. On the guidance point, we're asking signatories to provide the contact name of someone that can be contacted in the event that payment isn't received, and to have a system for dealing with and resolving disputes that might arise. And in adopting good practice, we've issued a logo that signatories can use to demonstrate their commitment to the code principles to use on their stationary websites and so on. More generally, we've measured compliance since 2019 from large businesses with the payment practice reporting portal that they have to submit reports on. But for all other businesses, we're going to require them to submit an annual declaration confirming that they have been complying with the code, are complying with the code, and will continue to comply with the code principles. And we are going to be able to investigate intelligence received that suggests businesses aren't compliant, even if we haven't got a formal complaint from somebody about a signatory. So in general, we're just tightening up the edges and making sure that it's more effectively. And I'm pleased to say that since we took it over in March last year, we've had over 600 new signatories, and we're now just approaching 3,000 signatories. And we're seeing that grow on a daily basis.
That's really interesting. So the prompt payment code, is that something that small businesses can utilize if they're having trouble with late payments? They could use that as a tool. They could mention it, in a communication with a supplier or with a debtor. Is that something that they can use at this moment, right?
Yeah, it certainly can. Let me first of all clarify that it's not only large businesses that can sign up to it. More than half of the signatories are small businesses, so we encourage businesses of all sizes to sign up. But yes, if you're supplying somebody and they're not paying you, and they are a signatory to the prompt payment code, then you can challenge them by clicking on a link on the prompt payment code website, which will enable us to intervene and talk to them. And as you say, really good advice. If someone's a signatory not paying you, it's really worth mentioning. And I know people that do that regularly, and it has a real impact. If you find the name of the person that signed the application and you mention their name to the accounts payable team, that can have a real impact, and it's a good practical thing to do.
That's great. Yeah, really, really interesting stuff. Yeah, again, it wasn't something I was aware of before our conversations, but it's good to know that it's out there and being worked on. So if you're a business and you're needing help or you're having issues with late payments, how do you go about getting help from your office? And you mentioned earlier that I think most of it or all of the services are free, but what would be the process for small businesses handling late payment issues and getting in touch with you?
Well, I know you're going to share the contact details later on, Kuan, in the chat, so I won't go through those. But our website is smallbusinesscommissioner.gov.uk. If you go on there, there's email links, there's phone numbers, and you can just reach out to us and contact us, or indeed contact us through LinkedIn or Twitter, or contact me through LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm very happy to talk to people and to set up conversations and so on. So a number of ways you can reach us. And we're there and waiting to help.
And I guess it should be seen as something that everybody can use. I think when you see the small business commissioner in the logo and it being, a part of the government and all that kind of stuff, people maybe think it's not for them and not for their small business, but for large businesses. But that's not the case at all, is it?
Absolutely not.
Okay, great. And we discussed that you have had a vast array of powers and things you've been able to do over the past few years, but I think that's been extended, the scope of what you've been able to do as the SBC. And I'd like to know, what's changed, what can you now do, and what the benefits of that will be for people, having the struggles of handling late payments.
Okay, so to answer your question, honestly, nothing's changed yet, but there are some changes afoot. So a consultation closed just before Christmas, the government put out. Having been in place for 3 years, there have been some learnings, obviously, and government wanted to review what had been achieved and what else might be done. So the consultation talked about extending my powers to enable me to order companies to pay either in a lump sum or in a payment plan, and to award compensation where payment had been withheld unfairly, to compel disclosure of information in order for me to carry out an investigation more effectively, to launch an investigation into a complaint without having had a formal complaint from somebody, but just based on intelligence, and to claim investigation costs where I'd invested in my team looking at something. And in terms of the scope, it looked at expanding my scope to be between small and small businesses, as well as between small and large, which is the current remit, and to also allow me to review and report on wider matters beyond just late payment at the instruction or request of the Secretary of State. Now, none of those powers have been granted yet. They were all consulted on. Responses have been received, and government is reviewing those. And sometime, in the future, government will announce what it wants to do and how it responds to that, and then start looking at legislation to introduce changes. But at this point, I have no idea what those changes will be, and it's not for me to comment on them either. I carry out the powers rather than set them.
Okay, good to know. And then I guess one of the sort of final points that we can hopefully expand is we talked about it briefly earlier, but cash flow is key for small businesses. It's always going to continue to be king for the rest of this year and going forward. And I guess just some advice from you for small businesses on how they can ensure this doesn't dry up and how they can keep going forward even if they are having late payment issues, those kind of things. I think there's people on the call which would be really, that sort of information would be really helpful.
Okay, Kieran. So I think if cash flow's been king, and I think it always has been, it's going to be king, emperor, president, and whatever else you want to call it in the months ahead. And it's really important that it's managed. Someone once said, turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, but cash is reality. And that's really true. Businesses fail when they run out of cash. When they can't pay the rent, can't pay a key supplier, can't pay employees' wages, they fail. And we've seen that repeatedly, in the high street and elsewhere. When businesses run out of cash, they fail. So it's really important that cash flow is watched and monitored. And it's really important that it's managed properly. When I say that, it needs to be planned. And I think there are numerous fintech solutions out there. Tide is one of them, which are really useful and easy to use and helpful. You talked about some of the functionality that you've got in terms of sending emails to chase payments and so on. And businesses need to plan their cash flow so they know what's coming in when and what's going out and when, so that they can make sure they know when they're going to be short of cash. There's nothing worse than going to a bank and saying, I'm desperately short of cash. Can I have a loan or an increased overdraft tomorrow, please? The answer is almost always going to be no. But if you know a month or 2 or 3 ahead that you've got a cash flow squeeze and you go to the bank or a finance provider, then you can talk to them and you can plan for that. So it's really important to be ahead of the game when it comes to planning for cash flow and potential shortages of it. Secondly, it's really important to monitor and to make sure that you know that what you expected to come in is coming in, and that if it doesn't, that you react to it. For many small businesses, cash flow seems just like a burden of administration, but genuinely it's the lifeblood of business. And I ran a small business for a while when I was chief exec at the Chartered Institute of Credit Management. And one of the things I did from day one there was just to get an email every day telling me how much was in the bank account. Because it's just a really good way of keeping an eye on what's going on. And over time, you start to recognize which points of the month it drops and it grows and so on. But it just gives you a sense of where the business is. And if you take your eye off that, there's a real risk. So monitoring it is important. And I think the third point around managing cash flow is listening. There are myriad sources of advice and help. Accountants, banks, organizations like Tide who put on webinars like this, where you can talk to people and learn from each other and learn from peers. Take expert advice and listen to it. The worst thing a small business can do, if you're a plumber and that's your skill, raising invoices, managing cash flow is probably not something that you either enjoy doing or are skilled at doing. So listen to people that help you, and use all the tools that are available to help you. And then in terms of cash flow, clearly, my focus is on late payment, and that's been my career. And the really important thing is that you get paid when you should get paid. And I think there are 4 questions that every small business needs to ask about every customer they deal with. Credit was never a good idea. Why would someone say to someone, I'll give you these goods now, pay me in 30 days? That makes no sense. So the only reason for giving credit is to increase sales. It's a way of getting someone to buy something they might not buy if they didn't have credit. So it's a sales tool, but it needs to be used wisely. So my 4 questions, the first is who? Who am I dealing with? If I get an order today from WH Smith, the last time I looked, there were about 10 WH Smith trading companies. So which one is placing the order on me? If I invoice the wrong one, they won't be able to pay me because they won't be able to put it through their books. So make sure I get the right name. If it's a sole trader, I should be invoicing the individual, not the organization. If it's a partnership, I need to know who the partners are, and so on. And I need to think about whether or not they are, going to pay me, and whether they are likely to pay me. So you mentioned earlier the prompt payment code. Look and see if they're a prompt payment code signatory. That at least suggests they intend to behave well. Look at, if it's a large company, look at their payment practice reporting report on the government website. Just search payment practice reporting and you can find it. Search for a business, it will show you every 6 months what their payment practice is. And that's a really good way of seeing how they behave. And if that says, their standard payment terms are 30 days, and they're asking you for 60 days, then that begs a question. But if it shows that they pay 95% of their invoices outside the agreed terms, then at least you go into the relationship with your eyes open, knowing you're likely to be paid late, and you can make a decision on that. The second question is when. If someone says to me, will you ship the product to me next Wednesday? The answer is, of course I will. The counter question is, when will you pay me? And that's not an aggressive question, that's just good business practice. So agree with the customer what the payment terms are and when they're going to pay you. If you don't know that, and they think they're going to pay you on 90 days, and you think they're going to pay you on 30 days, you've got a 60-day hole in your cash flow, which can prove fatal. So it's really important that you agree that. And even if you don't have a proper contract drawn up, and lots of businesses don't, then at least exchange emails with them. So you've got something in writing that agrees that they're going to pay you at a certain time for what you do. And make sure that you repeat those terms on the invoice that you raise and so on, and make sure you invoice promptly. But it's really important that you agree when you're going to be paid. Never leave it to chance. And if you need to negotiate, then do. It may well be that the procurement team are saying they want 90-day payment terms, but often they can be overridden if you talk to the person that really wants your product or service. So be willing to do that, and look for a quid pro quo. So if they want 60-day payment terms, then look for something in return for you. Maybe it's a longer cancellation period. Maybe it's a bigger order. Maybe it's a longer period of orders. Maybe it's less flexibility in the product you provide or something. But just try and get something back so that you win as well. The third question is how. How are you going to pay me? This is a really important one, particularly with large businesses. They will have a system for paying their invoices. There will be a portal, there will be a computer system, there will be some methodology by which invoices go into their organization, get processed, and payment comes out the other side. And it's really important that you know what that is. I get very frustrated when I talk to small businesses who say they don't trust the large company system, so they send the invoice to someone they know in Nuneaton who they are sure will make sure it gets through for them. Well, you know what? The mate in Nuneaton might not be there, particularly if he's working from home. But equally, the chances are when he's looked at the invoice, he'll have to get it into the same system they should have put it in the first place. So find out what the system is and know what the requirements are. What's the order number format? How many digits does it have? Where does the invoice have to be sent? Does it need particular details on the invoice? If you know all that, then you can make sure that your invoice will be received and processed at first point rather than having to come back for more information. And that's really important. And the final question is where? Where is my money? I supplied you a goods or a service as you asked for them. They work, they're fit for purpose. Surely you should now be paying me. Why haven't you? And that process should start before the due date if it's a large invoice. Just bring up and make sure it's been received and that it's okay and there are no problems with it. Do it as a customer service type call to make sure that your client is happy with the invoice you produced, and that it's in the system so you can follow it through. But on the day it doesn't arrive, that's the day to start acting. On the day it's due. Don't wait a week, a fortnight, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, because the chances are nothing will be happening while you're doing nothing. So we have a system in the SBC's office that we promote called Check, Chase and Choose. Check that the invoice was right and make sure that it is conforming to what was needed. Chase to make sure that someone's got it and it's being processed, and then choose what you do next. If someone isn't paying you, get in their face. Make sure that they know that you're expecting money, it was due to you, and it should have been paid. And be willing to step outside the norm. Yes, talk to the accounts payable team, but also talk to your contact in the organisation, get them to batch for you and to try and work for you to get it payment. If necessary, use LinkedIn or Twitter to reach out to people. If you can find the chief exec's name on LinkedIn, and there are some good websites where you can find chief exec's names, and LinkedIn, message him and just say, I've not been paid. He may not even know, and he may not be pleased to know that his organisation isn't paying suppliers as he'd like. So it's really worth making contact in any way you can. But if you're going nowhere, escalate. Escalate internally, as I say, find the chief exec, find the chief financial officer, talk to them, push them, chase them. And if you're getting nowhere after a couple of chases, then please talk to my office. That's what we're there for. And we will help, we will intervene, we will talk to the business for you, and we will do everything we can to encourage them to part with their cash and get it into your account, which is where it belongs. And we have a tremendous success rate when we do that. That's probably enough from me, Quant.
No, at all. Thank you for that. That was really, really insightful and really interesting to hear from you. And thank you again for taking the time. We're going to have some time for questions in a second, but just before we do, remember just to get your questions on the Q&A button, and we'll get to those in a minute. But just I wanted to give you a bit more information about Tide, what to expect from us over the next couple of days. Do remember to go and check out our website if you want to have a look, and if that's too much effort for you, don't worry, I'm here to help. In the chat room now, there is a link to sign up very simply to become a Tide member. All you need to do is click on that link and follow the very simple instructions. The same link will be included in an email that I'm going to send out to everybody that attended or didn't attend today's Masterclass, as long as they registered. If you are not a member, there will be the same link which is in the chat room now. All you need to do, like I said, is click on that link, download the Tide app, follow the really simple instructions, and become a Tide member very quickly, so we can help you with your business banking needs. There'll also be a link on that email to re-watch today's session, so you can send that and share that with your friends, families, colleagues, if you feel that this will be a benefit to them. All links to previous masterclasses as well, or information about upcoming events on our blog site, on our events page, and all the links to our social channels are also in the chat room too. So do please go and like and subscribe and stay up to date with what we're doing there. If you're watching this on YouTube, all the links for everything we've talked about are in the description below the video, and also remember to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with our future videos as well. During the Q&A session, I will be a quick quality poll, so if you have a couple of seconds to take part in that, I would really appreciate the feedback. And we'll now just try and get on with the questions that we have here. So one from an anonymous attendee is, what happens if the service has not been delivered due to COVID, the office not being open, but refers to long-term contact cleaning, pest control, long-term contract cleaning of pest control, etc., etc.? Is that something that you've come across before, Philip? And maybe you could answer that question.
Yeah, I think this is this is a typical pandemic question, isn't it? We've seen the world has changed. Services haven't been required and so on. And cleaning and pest control are typical things that were regularly required and are no longer. One of my things throughout the pandemic has been banging on about communication being so important. And I think this is an area where we really need to have open and honest conversations with customers and with suppliers, and understand that we are all in this together. And I've seen many examples where businesses have said, we know we don't need office cleaning like we did, but we also know that you need a livelihood, and how can we work together to work our way through this so that we all suffer a bit of pain, but neither of us completely get wiped out. And I think this is a case where there need to be open conversations.
Okay, I think that's really, yeah, like you said, it's really important. Open conversations are definitely going to be key. The next question is from Andrew Aldridge. We've seen during lockdown that a lot of large businesses are insisting on longer terms, i.e. 30 days to 120 days. Does your office get involved in these issues, or do they get reported to you as well as late payments? As in, I guess they're extending their terms without much warning. I would assume that refers to.
Yeah, so good question from Andrew. And yes, we do, and we have done. Many of the conversations I've had with large business chief execs have been around this sort of blanket email that said, sorry lads, COVID's here, we've got a bit of a problem, so we'll now pay you in sort of 120 days rather than 30. And I think we've got involved in conversations with big businesses, and we've seen them revoke those decisions and change them. We've seen a number of examples where they've revoked those decisions for their small suppliers, even if they haven't been able to for their larger suppliers. And I think this is back to the, what for them might be rows on a spreadsheet and a sensible commercial activity, for their smallest suppliers can be terminally damaging. So it's really important they recognise. And what I've done is to spell out the impact of that to large businesses. And I'm pleased to say I've seen numerous examples where emails have been sent saying exactly this, that have then been reversed and revoked, and payments have been resumed on 30 days. And indeed, in one case, what was 30 became 15, and they started paying quicker when they understood the impact they were having. So I think it's a really important area, and I would be pleased to hear any intelligence from anybody where they're suffering from this, and I'd be happy to intervene.
Great, thanks. And what would the process be, Philip? Like getting just in touch with you directly, or like Philip said, we will be providing all the contact details for his office in the post-event email, which you'll be getting with links to sign up to Tide, etc. They've very kindly provided us with a great PDF leaflet with information on and their full contact details. So keep a lookout for that email. They'll have those contact details on too. But is there like an online form they need to fill in with these kind of issues, Philip, or is it just a case of writing an email with the details on?
No, they can use our inquiries email address, but equally, send a tweet to me, Philip King ICM, or to me at LinkedIn. You'll find me easily enough. I'm very happy to pick up LinkedIn messages and get involved, and then get the team involved if I need to. So any route you want, come back to me. I'm happy for you, Kwan, to share my personal email address when you go out to.
Okay, I'll make sure that's included in the email. Thank you, I appreciate that. That's really very kind of you. I'll make sure that's included in the post-event communications that we have with everybody that registered for the event. There are no more questions that come in. I don't think. I might give somebody 30 more seconds to write any more questions that people may have. One's coming in. Here we go. So rates owing, this is from an anonymous attendee. Rates owing, have tried communication with Westminster Council and they have just said, no, not interested. I'm not sure I fully understand that question. Does that make sense to you at all, Philip?
I'm sort of assuming this caller is saying they can't afford to pay their rates,
yes,
and have asked Westminster Council for time. And that's public sector, so it's outside my remit, but
saying apologise, he was typing quickly, so hopefully we're going down the right road.
Yeah, I think again that's one where my experience has been generally, and maybe I'm being a bit naive here, my experience has been that councils and HMRC and most public sector organisations have been pretty tolerant and pretty flexible and pretty forbearing, and it's really important that that they do that. So I could, if someone gave me some details of that, I couldn't deal with it myself, but I could pass it to somebody who might be able to have some influence. I would be happy to do that, and I'd be certainly recommending that you talk to your local MP, for example, who should be looking at this stuff and getting involved. There's no mileage in a council, taking an intransigent view, doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah, it doesn't. It's not great, is it? But so whoever that is, again, it's come up as an anonymous attendee. If you want to get in touch with me, and I'm happy to share the information directly with Philip. But like we said, we'll share Philip's personal email address post this event. So if you want to get in touch with him after this, obviously, like you said, he'd be very happy to talk to you a bit further about that. And thank you again, Philip, for agreeing to do that. Very kind. Okay, there's some more questions coming now. Are there, from Sam Moody, are there certain steps or time passed that should have been taken prior to referring to you, as in your office?
Yeah, simple answer is no. But my recommendation is always, if you've tried 2 or 3 times and gone nowhere, then that's the time to bring us in. You know, if you've had promises that payment's going to arrive and it hasn't, and that's happened twice, then by all means get in touch with us and we'll intervene.
Great. Really helpful. And then from Andrew Aldridge, is there a maximum turnover level that is covered by your office?
Yeah, good question. I should have answered that when I was doing my presentation, really, answering your questions. Yeah, so the remit for me is I will deal with any small business with 50 employees or less, dealing with any large business of 50 employees or more. So 50 employees is a cut-off. But having said that, we will intervene informally outside of those boundaries where we can and it's appropriate. But the formal current position is less than 50 employees for the business talking to us, and more than 50 for the business we talk to. And that's one of the things being consulted on, as I mentioned in the...
That's great.
Earlier.
That's good to know. And then somebody anonymous again, what payment terms would you recommend for freelancers who work mainly with small businesses or individuals?
This is a really interesting question, isn't it?
Yeah.
My advice is, I think we're in different times, but if you're dealing with a small business and that small business is vulnerable, you run the risk of supplying them with goods or services, them going bust and you getting nothing, which is, a massive loss to you. And I think it's really important that you manage that. So my advice would be right now, try and get some sort of deposit or stage payment. Agree terms that are as close to zero as you can, recognizing the needs of that business. But don't just give. I think giving straight 30 days credit to a small business that you don't know is really risky. And if you can get some sort of down payment and some sort of deposit and stage payments if necessary, that makes real sense. Just by way of example, I've had some work on my house recently. One lot of work, I had an arrangement where I paid stage payments throughout the work being done, which was over about 3 months. On the other, there's no stage payments. There's one bit of work still to be done, and the contractor's had no payment from me at all and hasn't asked for any, even though he's done most of the work. And that's madness. You need to make sure that you're considering your own cash flow, and that goes back to my point about planning cash flow and monitoring it. Plan for what cash flow is going to be like. If you've got to buy stuff in, then make sure you're getting cash flow in to manage payment for that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And then whoever asked that question, apologies, it's come up as anonymous. We did a last week's masterclass was about going freelance. We had a freelancer come on, and the CEO from Crunch was there as well, and they had some really interesting points around that as well. So if you wanted to check the YouTube channel out and find that masterclass, there's some really interesting information which I think would be useful for you on that too. And I'm happy to share that link if you send your email across to me. I'm happy to share that link directly with you after this event. Quick question, we've still got a bit of time left, from Gareth Mackey. If a large business still doesn't pay after your team gets involved, Philip, what would be the next step? Is it court action, or how does it progress from there?
Well, I guess it depends on the value and the age and the whole who the customer is and a whole range of things.
Yeah.
But I mean, ultimately, then my team would advise you, if they aren't successful, and in most cases they are, but if they aren't successful, the next stage would be mediation or court action or something, or indeed we could go public and name them and create a situation where they are forced to talk to us and to recognise our intervention. So I guess it depends, but ultimately, yes, it would be court action, but we would advise you on that. There's clearly no point in suing somebody if the amount involved is going to be less than the legal costs are likely to be involved, for example. So there's a decision process to go through there.
Okay, that's great. Wonderful. I think we've got, oh no, hang on. No, it's okay. I got the email just about the freelance question, Kimberly. So I will make sure that we get that information. I'll send that link across to you for the freelance masterclass as well. But I think that brings us nicely to the end of today's session. Yeah, there's no more questions have come in, so we'll leave it there for now. And I just want to thank again, Philip King, thank you so much for taking your time out today and joining us. I think it's been really, really interesting. It's been an education for me, and hopefully for everybody that's joined. I wasn't aware of the work the SBC did, and it's obviously really important, and I know it's probably really appreciated by everybody that gets in touch with you, and hopefully everybody that's been on today's session has been educated as much as I have. So we thank you very much for your time. And everybody that's joined, thank you very much. Please do keep an eye out for those emails that will be coming post-event with links on how to become a Tide member, and also the links for everything that we discussed today. And we look forward to seeing you at future Tide events over the next few weeks. Thank you very much for your time, everybody, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.